Welcome to another reading of The World Don't Know This Jesus. It is written by Samuel Hess, and it is the testimonies and life story of Larry Goff and his family. And I have the honor and privilege of reading and recording these videos so that many people can continue to hear the mighty works that God did through the Goff family. I do have permission from the family to record these videos. A lot of my hospice patients enjoy hearing the stories, as some of them are up in age and have problems seeing when they read. So I'm excited. Today is we're going to be reading chapter 20, and there's one more after this. So here we go. Chapter 20. This was the spring of 1968. There are many pictures that are dated July 1968 that document this time in the Goff's lives. Larry and family began to learn many things about the Chocos and their way of life. A day or two after their arrival, Peronio and the men invited Larry to accompany them on a hunt. As Chocos set off at a trot through the jungle, it was all Larry could do to stay up. Mile after mile, they followed the narrow trail that allowed them to move through the thick jungle. When they were far off from the village, they finally stopped. Night was falling fast, as it does near the equator, and the men needed to make camp. This took Larry by surprise, but he had no option but to stay with them. His thoughts turned to Betty and the kids. He had not told her that he would be gone overnight. The men each had to find a tree to sleep in because of jaguars that roamed the jungle at night. As Larry found a tree and tried to fall asleep, his imagination went wild. What if all this is to get me away from my family so that they can have their way with Betty? He remembered how taken they were with the red hair, and Betty was sure to be quite a prize. Eventually, the Lord gave him peace, and he was able to get some rest. The next day, they were able to find game and return to the village with meat for everyone. It had been necessary to go far enough from the village to find good hunting. Having his family with him was wonderful in most ways, but it took time for Larry to learn to trust the Chocos and the Lord for where they were. One of the very good pictures they still have shows Larry returning from the Choco men with the game they killed on this first hunt together. Larry had already learned many of the ways and customs of the Chocos, but it took a while for Betty to get accustomed to their way of life. One of the first things she had Larry do was build an outhouse, although there didn't seem to be any others in the entire village. They were soon to find out why. After just a few days, Peronio told Larry that he would need to tear down the little hut that served as their bathroom. When Larry inquired as to the reason, Peronio showed him the flies and other insects that had begun to infest the area. "So where do you take care of your business?" Larry asked him. Larry had noticed that in the morning when he went down to the river, there would be a host of people, mostly women, squatting in the shallower water. He just assumed they were bathing. But now Peronio told him what was going on. The river was where the Chocos took care of their morning business. Each tribe member had their own place where they went every day. The higher ranking members and elders got the places of honor upriver from the others. A remarkable thing then occurred. Peronio took Larry to the place in the river that was to be his and his family, and it was upriver from Peronio's own spot. He could not have given Larry a higher honor. Another quite unusual thing the Goffs had to learn was how the toilet paper situation worked here. After completing one's business, nature's own cleanup crew would arrive. It took a while to get used to, but small fish would come and nibble away at what we used toilet paper to clean up. Betty never did adjust to this custom, and for the time they lived with the Chocos, it was Larry's job to secretly dispose of her bathroom waste. Larry and the kids, however, found the Choco way to be quite delightful. There were so many customs that were different between the Chocos' lifestyle and that of the Americans. The Choco men did not help with any chores. That was women's and children's work. The men hunted and fished and everything else. From cooking to chopping firewood to grinding rice or meal was done by the women. Larry would help Betty with everything, and the Choco men were astonished at this. Another thing that they did not do was share. This whole concept was foreign to them. Over time, both these things made an impact on the men and what they did and the way they related to their women and one another. Along with teaching the men the gospel, living out the gospel was equally important. The God of the Bible is no respecter of persons, and this was something they needed to see and learn. Before the Goths eventually left the Chocos, they were able to see even Peronio helping with chores and men learning the joy of sharing in very dramatic ways. Let me read that again. Before the Goths eventually left the Chocos, they were able to see even Peronio helping with chores and men learning the joy of sharing in very dramatic ways. Witchcraft had been prevalent with Chocos for hundreds of years. Like most primitive people, they were very tuned in to the spirit world. The medicine men and witch doctors used a combination of natural medicine derived from plants and roots to treat illnesses and spells that they would cast. These witch doctors were very powerful, and even the chiefs, like Peronio, feared and respected their powers. One day, Peronio brought one of these men to see Larry. The man was a witch doctor and was missing 2 toes and 2 fingers, which he had cut off. They believed this somehow gave him additional powers. Peronio told Larry that the man had a message for him. This was to be an ordeal that would test Larry as none had before with the Chocos. The witch doctor proclaimed a curse on Larry and told him he would be dead within 3 days. The Chocos had seen this man cast the same curse on others, and every one of them had died. Peronio told Larry, "You and your family must leave now." He described the curse to Larry in Spanish, which means the curse of the water. Every time this witch doctor cast this curse on someone, they would be drawn to the river where they would drown. Every single time without fail. Larry saw this as a great opportunity to demonstrate that the God he served, the one who had sent him there, and his son were stronger than any curse a witch doctor could put on someone. Peronio had already experienced the fact that Larry sometimes had to learn things the hard way. One time in the past, he had let Larry try to build a jungle house using his own methods, only to see it be a complete failure. In this case, Larry had been the one to have to humble himself and learn the proper method. Peronio told Larry, "You are a very stubborn man. Once again, you are going to have to learn the hard way. But this time, it will cost you your life. Why don't you just take your family and leave?" 6 times this man had come and cast the water spell on men in our village. 6 men have died, and I can tell you each of their names. This is real. But God was at work here too. Unlike the first Chocos, these people were not totally buying into the story of Jesus. It would take this event and others to bring them around. The Chocos may have been very primitive, but they understood spiritual power. This was about the forces of light and darkness coming head to head, and Larry knew he was in the middle of the battle. The Chocos told Betty to tie Larry to a pole for the 3 days so he wouldn't go near the river and be killed by the water. Of course, Larry refused and decided to take the battle to the enemy. After 2 days had passed and night approached, Larry took a blanket and went to spend the night right next to the river. In the past 2 days, the Lord had revealed to him through his own fear, which had grown stronger and stronger, that it was the spirit of fear that controlled these people. This evil spirit was one of the primary obstacles to their believing and trusting in Jesus. It was with this in mind that Larry headed to the river that evening. Veronio pleaded with Larry not to go. The women all began to wail and cry, but Larry was determined to show them that the God he served was the real power. The darkness of night was something they also feared, and this seemed insane to them. Larry went down next to the river and set up camp right next to it. That night, as he lay there listening to the night sounds of the jungle, spiritual warfare unlike he had ever experienced took over. Larry began to sing every hymn he knew to ward off the fear and the spiritual darkness he could tangibly feel. As he sang, "Victory in Jesus," and "There's power in the blood," the voice of the Lord came to him. "Are you trusting in those songs, or are you trusting in me?" he heard in his spirit. The Lord's instructions were clear. Don't trust in anything you know, songs, or even Bible verses. Just trust me. Just look to me. Larry has told me that we often put our faith in our own faith. We don't need to depend on anything but Christ in us. Our faith has to be in the Creator and not the creation. We often celebrate the event, but what we need is confidence in the one whom the event is about. When Larry was finally able to get to sleep, it was like he fell into a trance. He was probably dreaming, but at the time, it seemed much more real than a dream. In this part of the world, there are huge armadillos, and in this dream, he imagined a giant armadillo circling him over and over again. The earth was shaking, and he was terrified. He was aware that he was asleep, but fully expected to awake and find himself with a deep trench around him. There were loud crashes like trees and limbs breaking, as if he was in the middle of a powerful tornado. When morning finally came and he opened his eyes, he was shocked to see no signs of what he experienced throughout the night. It was hard to believe, but all this had taken place in his mind. As we're told in 1 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5, we have the power to tear down imaginations and strongholds. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Probably Satan's greatest tool against us is fear, and he'll come after us again and again with it. But if we know who we really are in Christ, we can and will keep the faith. When Larry walked back into the village that morning, Veronio and the people started screaming and cheering. They had never seen power like this, and they were one step closer to totally believing the gospel story. Larry was able to point out that this was not his power, but the power of him who lived within him. "Tell us more about him," they said to Larry. Finally, after 3 months, there was a real opening. They were now hungry to learn. But how could Satan and the forces of darkness kill Jesus? Because his Father allowed it. And this was the only way we could be made acceptable to and right with God, Larry explained. Everything seemed to be moving forward until the story of the resurrection. The Chocos could believe all the rest of it, but not a man coming back to life from the dead. This ends the reading of chapter 20. God is so amazing. So amazing. If we don't lean to our own understanding and we just trust Him, just continue to believe every promise that is written in the Bible. Continue to believe everything that others have gone before us, that their testimonies are written in the Bible, and see how God brought them through. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Why would He not protect us? Why would He not do what He did for them, for us? It's my experience, as is Larry's and his family. Wherever God sends me, He always protects me. No matter what it is that I face, no matter what it is that takes me by surprise, I always have to remember, and I tell myself often, sometimes every single day, this doesn't catch God by surprise, so I'm not going to let it faze me. And then I look to Him and I ask Him, all right, this catches me by surprise, but not you. You already knew this was going to happen. So what do I do now? How do you want me to proceed? Again, walk by faith and not by sight. Trust Him. Trust Him, trust Him, trust Him. With every step. He orders every step if we just allow Him to. I pray that these testimonies are blessing you, growing your faith, taking you to new levels of faith. I'll see you for the next reading. Blessings.